And guess what? Just
Yeah.
like that, we're live. And
Love it.
it's our second installment for the month of January. I'm really happy. I'm Mary Alice Curran. I happen to be right now located in Connecticut, and joining me is Steve Marcus, joining in from Boston. And we have partnered this month to really talk about the new year, right? Like new year, new habits, new digital habits as well around digital sportsmanship. And last week I felt like was awesome. Stevie,
Awesome.
like we got to have a reunion,
It
right?
was great. It was great. It was good to see, obviously, Mr. Buzang and Miss Whipple, and spoke to Buzang the next day. So it was good to catch up with him and do all of that. So it was a nice Wilbraham Munson reunion.
It really was. And so I just put it in the chat. If you missed last week, we really kind of were talking about like actionable items about being alert. And yes, our focus is definitely student athletes and teams and coaches and school communities. But I really feel like, Steve, like what we talked about last week wasn't just about what young people are supposed
No,
to be doing,
no,
right?
no.
Um,
It was refreshing to hear it from obviously Mr. Buzang on the college counseling side, but I had forgotten Miss Whip had taught classes. I remember I took a cooking class with her in the 6th grade. So it was nice to hear her and hear her perspective on things as a educator as well, not just in the training room.
it's like all these different layers and perspectives, and it really helps. It makes a really big difference.
Mm-hmm.
So I know just like today we're adding like one more layer, right? So last week was like focused on being alert. This week we're really I couldn't be happier to focus on digital wellness and mental health with the organization, like my go-to favorite. And when I think also about just the pandemic and the world turning upside down for everybody, when I couldn't find help, like the one place that I could find help was Eric Kuzin and the Same Here organization. So I'm going to pull Eric up right now. Eric, I'm so happy you're joining us.
Thank you for having me. Sorry, is my picture more narrow than yours because I'm on the phone instead of on laptop? Sorry about that. If I'm messing up the congruency.
It all works out. In fact, you're joining us someplace fun. Where are you right now?
So I'll kind of little zoom around here. It's
Not a
the
bad
Islanders Stanley Cup run there. So I'm at the UBS arena for the Islanders right now, and they gave me a little suite, I guess, in the private area in the suite level to do this call for the first period. So I'll admit the game's on in the background. I'll still get to see the game a little bit, but then I'll join them for the second, third period.
That's
okay,
great.
so if all of a sudden you break out like in a cheer, we know like somebody just scored or something, right?
I'll hear it in the arena, but I'm going to try to keep my eyes away from what's going on the TV.
Well, I'm really happy because for people that are joining us live, I mean, last week we were focusing in on like the importance of being alert, and this focus is going to be more about balance, digital wellness, mental health. But last week, we started it off by thinking about those traits, those like sportsmanship traits that like coaches are always like emphasizing, like I want this on and off the field or on the court, or what my organization, what we're interested in is we want it there, but we also want it online as well. So if anybody is wants to join in our comments, we'd love to hear what those traits might be so that we could have an interactive conversation. Just kicking us off, Steve, like you are my former middle school student, right? Like that to me makes me really happy all these years later, right? That we get to collaborate on this. So you're in this really great new venture. So do you want to just quickly, for people that didn't join us last week?
Absolutely. Yeah. The Prep Connection was an idea that I've had for a couple of years now. Had worked in the basketball space, upon graduation, really loved it. Thought it was going to be my, full-time career. And then obviously the pandemic happened and that kind of flipped everything upside down. I didn't have a plan B at the time because I was so enamored with plan A and wanted to just stick with plan A. And plan B kind of came to me with the Prep Connection over the course of the pandemic of what my dad told me. If I can combine two things that I love, then I'll never work a day in my life. And I was able to do that, working in the basketball landscape. And now it's helping families try to find the proper prep school fit for their, son or daughter or athlete. And, what we're trying to do is educate them on athletic fit, educate them on academic fit, cultural fit, campus fit, whatever it may be. There's so many different options out there for prep schools, right now. I'm based in Boston. We have a ton of them in the New England region. And for us at the Prep Connection, it's just, what can we do to help these families make the proper choice for their son or daughter? And it's been a fun venture that we've started now, and we're in the full swing of things. So it was obviously when you reached out, it was a no-brainer for us to connect and chat about what we're trying to do with the Prep Connection.
Okay, well, what I really loved, what you just said was you didn't it's looking for a sense of belonging, right? Like everybody, no matter where you are in your life, that sense of belonging, like this is a good fit. So I really love how you just described the Prep Connection, because it fits perfectly like pieces of a puzzle for our conversation this evening. So in the chat, if you have not, I want people to know more about Steve and the Prep Connection. So there's that website up there on the screen, how to connect on Twitter and Instagram. And then just Eric, so that last week we were already talking about you. So when we had our Wilbraham and Munson reunion, we were talking about the program, your school program. So I'm going to just jump to, our focus tonight, but specifically you have these incredible school programs. I was really lucky enough that I got to see it in person at Wilbraham. And so when we last week talked about it, it was really in preparation to that you were joining us this week. So would love for you to introduce yourself, as well as if we could focus in on these incredible programs that you are bringing to schools, because it's not just about the young people. It's like the entire school community coming together. So it's all ages.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. And I had to mute before if anyone saw that, because they were doing the player announcements and the room was shaking. So I either spared you or maybe that would have been an exciting thing, but I think it allowed Steve and Marielle to speak. And very similar to Steve, I'd say, with the advice that he got from his father, maybe the common theme in terms of hearing about his organization is two guys who are athletes who love sports, but being able to find passion outside of the sport itself. And when you find purpose and passion outside of the sport itself, where you can use sports in some other realm, some other venue, it's a beautiful thing to be able to bring that together. And in his case, helping people find the right fit for the school that works for them and their family. In our case, it's bringing programming. And Mary Alice, when you're bringing up that you saw our programming at Wilbraham and Monson, that was one pillar of 5 pillars that we typically bring to schools. And it doesn't end at 5, but that's kind of like our starting point. So that, I guess you'd call it a rollout with Wilbraham and Monson, was based on a grant that we had won from the NFL Players Association. Again, it's a good example, as Steve was talking about before. You have tentacles into the sports world and the passion's still there. So it's not like you're completely removed. So the NFL Players Association, from my former life working in professional sports, saw some of the work that we were doing and said, okay, here's some grant funding to go and do this in 10 school districts throughout the country. Wilbraham and Monson was one of the ones on the East Coast that we selected. And so we do these 5 pillars of programs. The 5 pillars are: first, culture change. So we need to establish what mental health even is in many of these school culture environments. Because most people, unfortunately, based on what society tells us, believe that mental health means mental illness. And that the way that we discuss this topic is through the lens of who are the 1 in 5 people who have depression, anxiety, PTSD, OCD, all the labels that come out of the DSM-5. And our goal in session 1 is to lay that culture foundation around the fact that this is a 5 in 5 topic. It applies to everyone. It lives on a continuum and it's moving up and down your entire life. It's not something that's binary that you either have or not. You don't have to look around the room and say, who are the messed up kids? So, Steve, please come to the guidance counselor's office. It's not about that Steve is the messed up child or the messed up student. It's that all of us are dealing with challenging life events, divorces, job loss, breakups of family members. physical abuses, verbal abuses, unfortunately, bullying, cyberbullying. There's not a person on the planet who doesn't go through those challenges. So if we could lay that foundational piece, which is what you saw, Mary Alice, with Wilbraham and Monson, we could then go and build off of that, because we think that rolling out education around mental health requires doing some kind of sequential work where one topic builds off the next. So, okay, if in pillar one, we're laying culture foundation, from there, pillar two, we need common language. So you see it on the bottom right there. It's kind of small next to my graphic, but that common language, if you ask someone right now, how are you? The most common answer when it comes to mental health is I'm fine, okay, blah. That's not an answer at all. That's a brick wall. That means that on a scale of a 1 to 10, you're giving a 5 answer. You're not giving a response at all. And so we created a scale off of a science. It's called polyvagal, which shows the shifts in the nervous system. That scale goes thriving, gliding, surviving, fluctuating, struggling, sinking. And there's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that come in underneath each one of them. And so the idea behind it is, okay, pillar one, we're all facing challenges. This is a continuum we're all on. Pillar two, what does that continuum look like? So that I can self-identify where I'm at, check in with myself and with others, teachers to students, even principals to teachers. So be able to gain a sense for how is someone actually doing, instead of, you see those memes all the time. How are you really doing? We shouldn't have to put a spotlight on someone's face and grill them. There should be easy language that we have in every other aspect of health. There's a weight scale for your weight. There's a thermometer for your temperature. There's a blood pressure cuff for your blood. There's nothing with mental health that's common language for us to be able to share with one another. So that's pillar two. Sounds like we just scored, by the way. Pillar three is the science of stress and trauma. So if we're all moving up and down on that continuum, or we call it scale, what's actually happening physiologically and biologically in our system that's changing? Our vagus nerve, the tone is changing. Our gut's becoming more porous. Our brain and our amygdala start becoming overfunctioned. We're sending more cortisol throughout our body. Our cells are becoming inflamed. These are things we need to know. Why? Because it's not just this chemical imbalance or this gray cloud that lives above us. We need to know what's being impacted from what we live through that's difficult, so that we can start to work on it in a proactive and a productive way and start to heal those parts of our body. So we go to pillar four, which is what we don't unfortunately want to go to, which is what are all the maladaptive coping mechanisms that we turn to when these changes happen to our body? The drinking, the drugging, the gambling, the alcohol, the burning, the cutting, the shopping, the hoarding. It's all these things that unfortunately the human condition is trying to avoid pain when we live through a lot of pain, because that's what a lot of us live through. And that pain can be physical or it's emotional, but we're constantly trying to avoid that pain. And no one teaches us tools. So unfortunately, what we do is we dive into the things that are easy to reach for on the list that I just shared. So we give explanations for why those things are that are easy for us to turn to. And then it leads to pillar five, which is, and I know you wanted to talk a little bit more about it, so I won't go into too much detail, but we call STAR exercises, which is stress and trauma, active release and rewiring, or a gym for the brain. So if you can find out from pillar three, what are the parts of the body that have been impacted, you can now start to do exercises that start to heal those affected parts of our brain, our body, our nervous system, to get them to a state where it was pre-trauma state, pre-chronic stress state, so it could be more in the moment, mindful, and present. And it's some terms that a lot of people will be familiar with, some that are brand new that people have never heard of before. But I'll end on this in terms of this first question. We won't go into something like suicide prevention as a first topic when a school asks us to come work with them, because if we come in right away because there was a loss in district where there was a tragic suicide, if we start using the term suicide right off the bat, we have a percentage of the room, just like what happened when we all grew up with Just Say No to Drugs, that said, that's not me, that's not my family, we don't engage in that, that's never going to happen to us. We need to lay the foundational work on the educational piece of how this all applies to us, how chronic stress and trauma builds in our system, to understand that everyone is susceptible to this thing called suicide happening. Doesn't mean we're all going to have the ideations, doesn't mean we're all going to be lost to it, but when you know that you're someone who's susceptible, you then are willing to listen to what are some of the things that I can do to make sure that that's not one of the outcomes that happens to me or one of my family members.
I don't know if you noticed, but I'm representing. So I'd love to talk about your logo, right? Because it's very inclusive. It's American Sign Language for same here. And, in just the short amount of time that I feel like, and this is my shout out to Evan Schwartz, I'm so grateful. I was invited to be on a panel with you. And then afterwards, I reached out and I have been a learner. Like I've been in the process. I've been up to my knees in it, right? Trying to change my own, perspective, language around it. But I really love this idea that instead of what you had said, instead of 1 in 5, 5 and 5, like you have challenges, you have struggles, same here, right? Like really making that the norm. And
Yeah.
I follow you. I feel like I actually am on Instagram for your account alone because I feel like you are calling out, you are teaching media literacy. You call out, news headlines all the time, and our words matter. And so, anyways, I didn't know if you noticed this in the chat as well. I put in because here is just a great opportunity for anybody that wanted to kind of experience those STAR exercises, which is bringing your brain to the gym, just like we bring our body to the gym. I put the Mega Minds link in there as well for an opportunity. But I'm sorry, Steve, you didn't get to see the Wilbraham and Munson like school program, but I'd love just to even tie back to you before we like keep talking about this. But why from Steve, from like your perspective around that digital wellness, around that mental health, what for coaches and school communities, why is this a necessity? Like, why should this be what we're leading with before anything else?
I just think, I mean, a little bit not off topic, but I had a friend of mine today reach out who placed a player at Oklahoma State to play basketball. And that player is a sophomore, and he's put out a statement today that he's stepping away from the game for a little bit to work on himself. And it's a lot of different things. The kid's 19 years old, has all the talent in the world, but right now he can't put it all together. And he needs to work on himself first before he can give Oklahoma State exactly what they need. And that happened this afternoon. I got that phone call. But I think, the whole mental health thing it's such a hot button issue in all of sports, not just basketball or not just football or whatever it may be, but there's and for me, a lot of it has to do with our phones because at the touch of a click of a button, you can, you search your name on Twitter after a bad game or you coached poorly and it's all just negative stuff. We didn't have that 10 years ago. You'd have to wait to the next morning for the newspaper article guy to kind of rip you. And now it's so fast and it's so, Eric, you talked about gambling. Guys lose, a player doesn't hit their parlay number or whatever it may be, and they get hate messages in their DMs. It's so quick that it happens. And what Eric's doing with Same Here, it's so great. And I've learned a ton just from listening to you in the last 5 minutes, but also the research that I did before. So I'm eager more to dive into it, on my own.
I have to add this new slide. I'm moving to the slide because I'm sure Eric is like, why am I looking at a picture of myself? But I have been DMing back and forth with Eric about JJ McCarthy. And I just grabbed that actually from your feed, your Instagram feed. I love what he is modeling. Like he is literally changing the narrative. So I don't know. Eric, if you want to say anything, either one of you want to say anything about it, but I mean, talk about he's getting hate. If you look at the comments, what people are saying.
Yeah. It's so JJ is someone who went to IMG Academy, which I'm sure Steve is familiar with. It's one of the premier academies where folks go in school to prepare both grades, but then their sport at the same time. And he mentioned experiencing a bout of, and I call it the symptom of depression because I don't like giving credence to this idea of disease, right? So feeling symptoms of depression. He did some of his own work researching. He said straight Google and YouTube and finding out, how do I break out of this? And for him, it was the practice of meditation, which for anyone who's hearing this and has had any background in mental health, that's not going to sound so lofty or so different. Oh, okay, meditation. big deal. We see monks do that all the time, and it looks all woo-woo, and people are holding their hands up like this. And I think JJ's experience in having a positive outcome from quieting his mind, which it plays into what Steve was talking about with social media. And we can talk a little bit about balance between parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. That balance, unfortunately, is when we live through a lot of challenging life events, like what I was sharing from the session, the pillar one. When you deal with the sickness of family members, when you deal with the loss of family members, when you deal with the bullying growing up, when you deal with what Steve was bringing up with looking, I know not everyone plays high level sports where you're talked about online, but you definitely have other people you're connected with online, and someone says something about you, or there's a comment on your thread, or someone doesn't like a post of yours, or whatever it is. And I don't want to make everything out to be trauma. That's also a thing that some people get caught up in. But chronic stress and trauma is defined as when your nervous system goes through any event where it overwhelms your ability to cope in the moment. So I kind of like to use this as an example, and I'll bring it back to JJ, is if you had a friend who lost a parent recently, you're a kid, you're 13 years old, and an ambulance goes by you on the street, and you're driving with your friends, parents, different friend, you're going to play a baseball game or whatever it is, you're going for band practice, and all of a sudden your mind goes to, wait a second, my friend's dad just passed away, and now that ambulance is going in the direction of my house. And oh my God, wait a second, what if that ambulance is going to my house because my dad, God forbid, right? And I don't even want to say it out loud. And now, as a 12 or a 13-year-old mind, your mind starts spinning and it becomes overwhelmed with this thought. I'm going to be going somewhere for 2 or 3 hours to play. I'm not going to find out about what happened at the house. And now when I get home, I'm going to find out about this catastrophe that happened. And now this thought plays over and over again in your mind. Now, some people might not define that as a trauma. I do, because I know what that's like to feel that, because I had a brother who was sick so many times that he can only get sick so often that the next time something happens, the phone rings and there is a caller ID for someone in your family, and your thought goes to, am I being called to get the difficult news again? And your nervous system goes into that state of overwhelm, and I can't handle that anymore. That's when the nervous system, what's called the sympathetic nervous system, our stress response, becomes our dominant response. And so when you think about athletes, we'll bring it back to what Steve does and what JG's doing on the field. What goes through our mind when we're about to go on that field? Well, we think these athletes, they're robots. And so we think, oh, they step on the field, there's no issue whatsoever, they're just great performers. Talk to any professional athlete who's retired, and they will tell you that the thought of there's 80,000 people in this stadium and there's millions of people watching on TV does go through their mind. The heckler that they are very well trained at ignoring is on their mind, okay? And so you're about to go in the stage, bright lights. He's about to play in a national championship game, which is what this picture is. His whole entire career, whether he's compared to Tom Brady as a quarterback in Michigan, is going to be compared to that. And that moment is going to be captured. Well, so what he did before that is, how does he bring that state of that stress response down so he could be in the moment at the game, what's called in your parasympathetic nervous system response, rest and digest, being able to take it all in and to be able to react in the moment and not be overcome by the fear of the overwhelm of all those things that are going on at once. And so in his particular case, he does a couple of techniques. One of them is called grounding. And yes, he took a lot of, I don't know what words I'm allowed to say on this thing, but he took a lot of slack for it because people said you can't do grounding, which is feet on the earth, on a turf field. Okay, well, the guy's about to go play on that turf field. You could absolutely do grounding on a turf field because he's grounding himself to the surface he's about to play on. Instead of cleats being between him and that surface, he wants his body to feel what that surface is going to be like. Then he engages in meditative practice against the goalpost. Then he's doing alternate nostril breathing, sending oxygenated blood to both hemispheres of the brain to create this balance in his nervous system. And so you see a lot of the reactions from people, and I call them reactions where hurt people, okay? Which is, there are people who are brash and bold on social media, and they don't like that this kid is a good-looking kid who's getting a lot of offers potentially coming his way for the NFL coming up, and it's got the world in his fingertips. And so they see him doing something that is good for humanity, but it looks a little weird and a little bit different than what's considered traditional. So immediately the fangs come out and he's all about attention on him. Look at that foofy stuff, fail, right? All these terms that you see underneath. That's a post by a guy named Darren Ravel. He's a big time sports business reporter. That post was seen over 360,000 times, I think is the latest count. So he's getting a lot of exposure out there for the normalization of doing these types of grounding practices before coming on the field, which is what every athlete should do. And instead, there's some people ripping on him. So I'm friendly with the former hockey player Theo Fleury, Mary Alice, and he's got a saying that the first ones through the wall always get bloodied. And I think that's what JJ's doing. Is in college sports, there's not a lot of college athletes that are willing to go, I'm going to go onto the field in front of everyone, and I'm going to let it out there. And he unapologetically says he's doing it to normalize it. So the joke's on all the people who are coming onto the social media pages and saying he's all about him. He only cares about, getting the spotlight on him. He's flat out saying before he does it, I'm doing this because I want the weirdness of this to be out there so it's no longer so weird. And it is normalized that we can do these practices. He absolutely knows what he's engaging in. And so you do get bloodied when you're some of the first people who are trying to normalize these types of practices. But, judging by how much of a winner he's been and the fact that they won a national championship, people can debate whether or not he had the greatest game or not. He had a lot of great games before that where he did similar practices. I think he's coming out ahead in the end.
Well, that particular news story, I mean, there's been a lot that are just out there, but I really, this one resonated with me. And I loved this post because it went back to your STAR exercises. So Steve, I don't know if you've ever done, any coach ever had you do a STAR exercise, but
Never.
Eric, I don't know if there's something that you could model, you could introduce, not just Steve, but anybody that's joining us live or that's going to watch this afterwards, because these exercises, this is like bringing your brain to the gym, and this is for everybody.
Yeah, so I'm going to do a simple one, but I'm going to explain it in the context of something more complex, so that in the short amount of time that we have, people don't think, oh, like breathing practices, that's all there is, and we hear that all often. So there's an app called Calm, an app called Headspace, and you hear that there's meditation on there. What I want people to think about is, think of meditation as a treadmill at the gym. Well, the treadmill isn't the only thing there is at the gym. There's an elliptical, and there's a Stairmaster, and there's a bike, and there's a free weights, and there's universal weights, and there's a kickboxing bag. There's all these things we can do at the gym. So meditation is but one practice. Breathing, which I'm going to teach you one of the exercises, is but one practice. So is something called havening. So is something called tapping. So is something called EMDR. So is something called brain spotting. So is stretching and yoga poses, right? And so we've got a list of about 20 modalities that fit under this concept of a gym for your brain. It goes back to that pillar 3. What are the impacted, affected parts of my brain and my body, and this connection between the two, that if I start to do these exercises, they start to normalize and bring me back to the states that my body and these structures were in before some of this chronic stress and trauma built up inside of me. So let's take a nerve. It gets talked about a lot, but the explanation for why it gets talked about a lot, unfortunately, isn't shared very often. So there's a nerve in the body called the vagus nerve. So it starts in your brainstem on both sides, and think of 2 branches that goes down to your stomach. So it's the longest nerve in the body. Now, why would we have developed as human beings having a nerve going all the way from here all the way down there? Well, our brains see things and react to it and process it, and then our body needs to do something based on how our brain processes it. Okay, what's the carrier messenger that's going to send, once our brain processes it, what our body needs to do is our breath. So back to the ambulance going by, if all of a sudden you're in your car and now the ambulance goes by and you go, which is a very common thing that we always do, you're telling your body, I'm not breathing in and out in that rhythmic pattern like I normally do. Something just changed. Well, that vagus nerve has the vibration of that change in that breath that goes down that vagus nerve to send to the rest of the body. Something volatile just happened. Something difficult I need to prepare for. either running and going to take care of something or hiding and running away from it, but it's not business as usual, okay? So we lose what's called vagal nerve tone when we go through these challenging life events over and over again. And I want to describe vagal nerve tone as, think of that vagus nerve, think of the consistency of it as a rubber band. So when you're breathing naturally, that rubber band is vibrating in a certain way because the air is going across it, telling the brain and body and the connection between the two, everything's okay. Well, if you go like this, that's changing the way the breath is going through that, right? Okay, well, the ambulance doesn't go by all the time. No, it doesn't. But your thoughts of, if I'm talking to parents right now, my child is being bullied at school. Mom and dad are sick. I don't know if I can pass that test. Subconsciously or consciously, we're changing the way we're breathing pretty frequently. So what happens is when we lose vagal tone, we start to see that consistency of that rubber band in our vagus nerve. And this is an oversimplification. So for anyone who's checking me on the science of it, I'm using it for visualization purposes. So imagine the consistency of that rubber band now becoming like a ruler. It's stiff. Can your breath vibrate a ruler as easy to send the carrier messenger of the breath? Can it vibrate that ruler as easily as it does a rubber band? There's no way. It's going to hit into it and thud out. So we do these rhythmic breathing patterns to start to create greater vagal tone, is what they call it, get us back to that consistency of that rubber band between the nerve that's connecting from the brainstem all the way down to the stomach. So I'll do 2 breaths with everyone just to kind of give a little bit of the practice and then a little bit of the science behind it. So breath 1 is called victory breath. If anyone is a LeBron James fan, he does it before every single game. I'm more of a Michael Jordan fan than LeBron James fan, so it shows that I actually am willing to buy into this practice, even though it's not my guy. So with victory breath, I want you to hold your hand out and pretend like you were going to fog up a mirror, right? You'd make this sound. You're going to fog up the mirror. So the breath is coming from the back of your throat. Think of a target literally on the back where your neck meets the top of your head, and the air is emanating right out of that area. So I want you to do the same exact thing where the air is coming out of that area, but instead of it coming out of your mouth, I want you to close your mouth and force the air from the same spot out of your nose to fog up the mirror. So you go, sounds a little bit like Darth Vader. Okay? So, sorry, text just came in. So we're going to do that on the way out. And on the way in, I want you to pretend like that target that meets exactly where the back of your neck meets the bottom of your head, that you're breathing in through your nose and you're trying to target the air right back to that area where it came from. So it's like that. Okay? And now what I want you to do is, I want you to think about also, as you're breathing in and out, that vagus nerve that I described being the consistency of that rubber band, I want you to think about that vagus nerve is vibrating as you're doing it. So we're breathing in, breathing out. And as you're breathing out, it's literally vibrating that vagus nerve, okay? Now the pattern of the breath, we're going to do 4 seconds in, hold for 4, and then breathe out slowly for 8. Breathe in for 4, hold for 4, and out for that 8. So the science behind that longer out breath than the in breath, go back to that parasympathetic sympathetic balance. Our way our nervous system is structured, when we breathe out longer than we breathe in, a little bit of the science there is the way that our chest cavity is either increasing or decreasing in size. It's changing the size of our heart and the amount of blood that's going through it. So it's sending a message when we have the longer out breath to our brain, okay, you're in a mode where you can chill and calm down right now. So if you forget all the things that I'm sharing here right now, if you're ever in a mode where your sympathetic response, meaning your anxiety is what they call it, level is getting high. If you can't remember in the nose, out of the mouth, what do I do? Is it nose mouth thing? How long? Just do longer out breath than in breath. And that creates greater, which is that rest and digest response. So that's number 1. The number 2 I'll just show is, imagine you have 2 fingers and you put them on the bridge of your nose, and then you have your thumb on one nostril and the other nostril's open. So you're going to breathe in the nostril that's open for 4 seconds. So breathe in, hold it for 4, and then you're going to switch nostrils. You're going to put your ring finger on the nostril that was open, and now open the one where your thumb was and breathe out for 8. Now that same one that's open, breathe in for 4, hold it for 4, switch fingers, put the thumb back on, and breathe out for 8. Back in the one that's open for 4, hold it, switch, out for that 8. So that's called alternate nostril breathing. That's what a lot of people saw JJ doing on the field. Why does that work? Yes, the longer out breath with the vagal nerve that we were talking about, but the bigger thing is you're sending oxygenated blood to both hemispheres of the brain at the same time. And here's like a little joking thing that most people know exists, but we don't know why it does. Even when you don't have a cold, we've got that little annoying spongy thing in the back of our nose, and it feels like it switches sides. And we're like, why does that happen? Why isn't it both filled, or why is neither of them filled? Why is it always one side? Not to get to being a little kid and like sticking your finger up there to figure out what it is, but it's reality. We all done it before in our life. So the way that we evolved as human beings, whatever your belief system is, however that evolution happened, is there's a dominant nostril that switches every 2.5 hours, because what we're told is the left side of the brain is more logical thinking, right side is more creative thinking. And so for evolutionary purposes, there's sometimes we need to be more in our logical brain, sometimes we need to be more in our emotional, creative thinking brain. And so that switch of that dominant nostril happens on average for each human being every 2.5 hours, which means we're not used to having oxygenated blood going directly into both hemispheres of the brain at the same time. So when we force that in there, we're creating balance where balance typically doesn't exist. And most people notice it, like when you're in a meeting, you're like, why right now logically are things coming really quick to me and I could do things with numbers a lot more easily. And then other times you're like, that's so weird. I'm coming up with more creative ideas than I did before, right? And again, that's an evolutionary adaptation to try to be able to maneuver what's going on around us and take advantage of the opportunities that we have. I don't recommend doing this all the time, all day, every day. But if you're about to go into a very stressful situation like JJ was in that particular game, forcing oxygenated blood to both hemispheres of the brain and doing it for a practice of, I'd like to say, at least 5 rounds of doing the alternate nostril breath. So a round is in one, out the other, in one, out the other. That's 1 round. Or for 5 minutes. So do it about 5 minutes, and it creates this balance back to that whole parasympathetic response in a way that we don't typically have. So I didn't want to make it all about breath work, Mary Alice, but those are the 2 faster ones to be able to show and to be able to give some of the science behind it.
Well, I appreciate that. And we put this together. Last week we had, like some actionable items that they could do around checking their privacy. Going back last week was like, go back and get an old fashioned alarm clock. Don't sleep with your, mobile device right by your bed. We had just things that you could actually do. So we put this together about and I know that I have to really work on these, like sunshine before screen time. This is for all ages. There's that old fashioned alarm clock. Again, I put that in. Do you like my brain? Bringing your brain to the gym. That was thinking of you, Eric. And when my son was little, I would go, a big Red Sox fan, would go to Fenway Park and I would say, we're going device free. And I would literally leave the phone in the car. And he would say, as little kids who always bring a glove to the game, but today's the day I'm going to catch the fly ball. And I would say, but you're going to remember that the rest of your life. I mean, how many of us, whether it's to fireworks or a concert or a graduation, whatever the event, and we are experiencing it through our phone, right? So having those times and having those conversations where we are saying we're going device free, to be present. I know that it was probably easier when he was younger. How many adults that are joining us now will say, especially if you're a parent, that you're telling your child or your teen, oh, one more thing. I just have this like one more call or this one more email. It's important to be mindful about taking times to unplug. My other one is always about going back into nature, and then eating real ingredients. So those are some like just actionable things that I wanted like to put together, specifically around digital wellness and mental health, and great information for student athletes and coaches and school communities. But again, no matter how young or old you are, this is something that we should all try to be better at. And I don't know about you, Steve, but while we were doing the breathing exercises, like I felt
Relax.
the calm.
Yeah. I've never seen or done the one nostril thing, but it makes total sense. And it was incredibly calming and soothing and grounded you to go back to what JJ was doing with his feet on the ground, and it grounded me, even being in a chair.
I feel like
And
for those fight or
obviously,
flight, right? That's when we would do it.
well, look. So there's two reasons to do it, Marielle. Sometimes when you're in the moment and the stress is coming on, it's a grounding technique to lower that response. But I try to caution people, don't wait for that to build up to get to that place. You want to build capacity. So if you make it a routine, right? If you're going to the gym every single day and you're burning a certain number of calories and you're getting metabolism up, then when you go during the holidays and you eat the extra pizza cake and you have the pizza and you indulge in the carbs, it's not going to affect you as much, right? Whereas if you wait and wait and wait because you just weren't going to the gym at all, and then you hoarded on everything that was on the table during the holidays for 3 days in a row, you're going to feel awful and feeling like you're needing to dig out of the hole to get there, right? So these practices are meant to become part of your daily routine. And some people say to me, I don't have time to do that. And my response to that is, we don't realize how much time we waste doing this. And then when the brain isn't clear, guess what happens? We're wasting time anyway. How many times have we written sentence in an email and then we had to erase it because it didn't come out the way that we want? How many times did we say something on a voicemail? No, that's not the right thing. I got to erase that and go back to that. How many times have we read something, go, that didn't come through clearly? Or look at that something, said, I got to look at that more closely. If we do these exercises, if you think of them as a power washing of the brain, your brain's clearer now. You're not going to be engaging in as many of those things that unfortunately you have to go back for and redo. So you're finding time in places instead of actually losing time by doing the exercises.
Well, I wanted to, especially, I want you to go enjoy your game, Eric, but I wanted to bring this up before we end, because you're at a game right now. But I love that you not only just work with school communities, but sport organizations, and I love that organizations are carving out time and space for fans to be having this conversation that we're having tonight. So I know that we are going to do a third installment for this Digital Sportsmanship Webinar Series. And our next one is on the 25th. And we're looking at community service and, outreach to the community. And Lakeshore Central is joining us. And they are actually going to be they're going to be with you, right? They're going to be a part of this Sabres. So do you want to say something quickly about this upcoming event, especially for anybody in the Buffalo area?
Yeah, I give the Sabres a lot of credit. It goes back to what Steve was bringing up earlier. I just want to double down on that you can take your passion, in my case with sports and Steve's case with sports, and bring it into another aspect of, community, society, organization. And so in this case, bringing mental health into sports communities, sports is where we get a great number of eyeballs. And so my attempt was to parlay the relationships that I had in sports to get the mental health messages out there wider. Now, you look at a traditional theme night in sports, and I'm in an arena where I can give them a hard time, even though my friends run the operations here, because it's corporate making decisions going, Northwell owns this, marketing rights to this. And so we're going to call Mental Health Night by Northwell, and we're going to give away a spongy giveaway for a foam finger. And that's it. That's the whole activation. And I'm not being fair, but I'm also being real. like we need organizations like what we're seeing here with the Sabres willing to say what we're doing with the Sabres is they're busing school kids in. They're bringing them in for a first-person suicide prevention safety training that we're doing during the day. We're meeting with the staff in the middle of the day. We're then having a panel at night where parents are being invited to come around, and we're bringing members of the school community to talk about what the school programs are like and what it's like to implement culture change in their four walls, or obviously many more walls than that, but you get the analogy that I'm making there. Then in game, they have me talk with Marty Baron, who's one of the former players, and Duff, who's their hosts in between the first and second period, and we talk mental health and the changes that we're seeing happen in the Buffalo area and why we're bringing these programs to school. So it's as much a normalization exercise as it is kind of like some of the stuff we were doing for the first 45 minutes of this call, which is bringing content to the community as well, and rolling up our sleeves and saying, let's actually have the difficult conversations and bring the skills along with them. If we don't have teams willing to do that, and all teams are going to do is slap a logo and say it's Mental Health Awareness Night, great, the sponsor got what they're looking for, this topic never gets better, and the trends that we're seeing going in the wrong direction never get reversed. So I applaud teams like the Sabres and their teams all throughout sports willing to do things like this. So if anyone is in and around the Buffalo area, the game's on the 17th, all things weather permitting, we're going to be there and excited to have a good time and a lot of activation at the game. Post-game photo on the ice with one of the players, all making the same here sign that Mary Alice loves. So we'll make a tradition out of that every year because this is year 2 of it.
That's pretty awesome. I'm going to put in the chat right now too, because Lakeshore is joining us next week, and I know that Steve, I shared this last week on the webinar about Damar Hamlin, and like I love what this school community does, and this is a shout out to Michael Drezick, and when that happened to Damar Hamlin last year, the students at Lakeshore wanted to do something. You identify a real problem in your community and you wanted to do something different. And so they wanted to make sure with the Heart Association that all of the athletic department and all of the student captains, everybody knew CPR. It was just a really fabulous example of young people making a real difference within their community. So it's another great connection. So we have the Wilbraham and Munson connection, and we have the Lakeshore kind of thread that's happening for these 3 sessions. So I could listen to you, Eric,
Same.
like longer and all the time. And for anybody that might be new, this is like, you are my go-to program. And if you are on Instagram, please don't miss the opportunity, because whether, Eric, you realize it or not, you're teaching media literacy. And I feel like I constantly am unlearning and relearning. And I'm so grateful for that. And I'm grateful that you are a leader in this space.
Thank you for the kind words. Thank you for introducing me to Steve. We'll talk more, Steve and I, and appreciate you both having me on. And sorry that it's a little rushed with the game coming back on now. But when I got the tickets and I had committed to doing this for Mary Alice, I wanted to split it up a little bit, where I came here for the first period and then I get to go back there for the second and third. So 1-1 right now. So it's basically a tie game to get to start off again.
I love it. Well, we really appreciate your time. And this is a conversation that I know in the spring too, you have a whole month of some same here, but I feel like all year long, this is the conversation that all school communities need to be having, not just for the young people, but for all the grownups as well. So, so this is great. So on the 25th, you can, in fact, Eric, if you want to say your goodbye, so you go to the game, and then Steve and I can, finish this up.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again for having me on and for pairing me with Steve, and I'll be in touch with Steve. And for anyone who watched, if there's anything we can do to help, whether it's programmatically or you just got a personal question and you want to run it by me, I'm sure Mary Alice has all the information that she'll share on the screen with everyone. So
I can be the unofficial agent.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for doing that and pipping us out. So appreciate it. But have a good night, everyone. And
Thank you, Eric.
Later, Steve.
Enjoy.
Perfect. Enjoy the game.
Bye.
Bye. So, Steve,
Wow.
what do you think?
He's big time.
I mean,
He is big time. How did Wilbraham Munson find him?
okay, I don't want to, take credit, but I wrote to John
Okay.
Buzang
All
and
right,
I
good.
said, I know that there's this grant with the NFL
Mhm.
and which made it free. Like this was for that particular one, it was free programs. And so schools had to apply.
Mhm.
So, John Buzang passed it on to somebody in the counseling department
Mhm.
and they put the application together and, schools were chosen. And so
Wow.
both Wilbraham and Munson, as well as Lakeshore, that's joining us on the 25th, they both had the opportunity. And so Eric came with an NFL player, and it was really, really powerful. And I was so glad. I asked if I could be a +1, if I could join, if Wilbraham would let me back in just to experience it. So I feel like this conversation is the
Yeah.
conversation that needs to be happening in all schools.
Totally. Because it's never. I mean, we look at these public figures, and again, I only always go back to sports, but we think, like he said, you're in an arena with 80,000 people. We just think that that's normal. Like that's so not normal. Like they at the end of the day, they put their pants on the same way we do. They tie their shoes the same way we do. But they're these, they have this unbelievable talent, but they still go through the same things that we do.
Right, right. Seeing
On
the
a
human.
larger scale.
Yeah, this is seeing the human sitting next to you around the
Mhm.
world across the screen, right? Like, and I feel like what he's done with Same Here too is he has leveraged every sport contact that he has so
Totally.
that young people now can see some of their heroes and say, I see myself in you, right? Like seeing the human. Like
Mhm.
you struggle, you've got a challenge, same here. So I'm really happy, Steve, that we got an opportunity.
Same. Same. I can't wait to connect with them more offline.
Well, I feel like your worlds
Totally.
are you didn't even have a chance, but like there's so much overlap in just the basketball world as
Mhm.
well. But especially even with that school programming, and as you continue with the Prep Connect, in fact, I'm just going to go back to that slide
Sure.
because I feel like this is a conversation when because you talked about it, that sense of belonging,
Mhm.
finding that sense of belonging for, for your student athletes. And this just goes hand in hand.
Totally.
So,
Totally.
so I think we're going to have to get you a t-shirt. And don't you wish that you were still at Bonnie's, St. Bonnie's, so you
I
could
know,
go
because
to
I'd go to the game. I'd go to the
the
game for
Sabres
sure.
game? Yeah. So
Yeah,
for a little Same Here.
I'm excited to connect with him, and thank you for having him on and joining us, because he was a wealth of knowledge, and he's done a lot of really great stuff, and he's going to continue to do a lot of really great stuff.
Oh, absolutely. So for everybody that joined us live, thank you. For if
Thank
you're
you.
watching this after the fact, we really wanted to make this commitment to January, this new year, having these conversations that really matter.
Mhm.
And we're taking a break next week, but on
Yep.
the 25th, we're coming back and we're really focusing on community outreach, like what teams can do, like the importance of that. And Lakeshore Central is going to be joining us. Michael Drezek, I think some students as well, which will be really exciting.
Great.
And I'm going to be in Orlando. So when we connect for that, I'm going to
Weather,
be,
the weather
yeah,
will be a little bit better.
yeah, I'll try to bottle it up and bring it back home. So
Please.
again, listen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
This has been really fabulous. I've got a really full heart.
I can't wait, and look forward to seeing you now in 2 weeks.
All right, that's perfect. And thanks for everybody that's joined us.